Okay. Hello, everybody. Thank you very much for attending this fantastic opportunity. For all the people who is following us in the channel in YouTube, and also for the people who is right here, thank you very, very much for coming. During this week, Universidad Nacional it's attending and creating this great opportunity to get together all the group of knowledge transfer group. And we have some special guests, and I will, sorry to interrupt. Guys, we just started. Great. Thank you. Sorry, we are in this hybrid system, so it's not easy. Okay, so as I was telling, Universidad Nacional has started a project to really strengthen innovation, technology transfer, knowledge transfer, and innovation at all the campuses at Universidad Nacional. This is the first encounter that we are having with all the teams from the different campus, from the 9 campus of Bogota. And as part of this opportunity, we have 2 special guests, and we are going to present two talks with all the experience that they have. And the first guest that I have here is Freedman. I have the greatest of the pleasure that during my sabbatical, I met Jim at MIT. Jim worked for several years at the Technology License Office at MIT. And he's now retired, but I would say he's extremely active for being a retired. It's just a title, I would say, but more than a real action. He's currently serving as independent consultant to individuals and organizations related with the technology and knowledge transfer. But he worked for several years creating too many projects at MIT. He was also directly involved in various aspects of the ecosystem that drives the Institute of Entrepreneurship, the culture in the Boston area, in Massachusetts. He worked with several technologies and several initiatives like the Massachusetts Clean Energy Center, for example. And he served also as a co-chair of the Boston chapter of the Licensed Executive Society. He was the associate director at MIT until he retired. This year, you retired this year. So I think that technically this is your first professional trip after you being a professional. Jim, I would like to thank you very much for being here. He is going to talk about the MIT experience in technology transfer and commercialization. So this is your time. So after the talk, I will give you some questions that we are going to receive online, but this is your time. Thank you very much for being here.
Thank you for that introduction. And I'm very happy to be here at this, I think, probably initial meeting, bringing together many of the technology or knowledge transfer offices from Colombia at the early stage of hearing what's going on in different areas and trying to unite them. And it's very exciting. I hope to share experiences that I had at MIT over 15 years' time with a disclaimer that not all of these things necessarily apply here, nor should they. And there are other unique things to the Colombian environment that I hope to learn and help to harness. So, university technology transfer, or technology transfer in general, is a term that can mean many different things. Very often, we are familiar in an academic environment of the common ways that faculty and students and staff transfer technology at some level or another through the normal academic means of publications, presenting at prominent conferences. Faculty may, certainly at MIT and maybe here also, have certain rights to consult in industry, possibly, and other kinds of educational pursuits that occur all the time. The area of technology transfer that I spent 15 years working on was with more, excuse me, more of a commercial focus, and basically creating intellectual property from the products of research at MIT, and then using that as an asset to help drive the commercial economy in Boston and the region in New England and in the US and in the world. And that transfer of technology happens through corporate sponsored research by companies, and companies gain a lot of direct knowledge of state-of-the-art processes and thinking, and students and faculty by sponsoring research. Often this kind of, at MIT especially, which is a very entrepreneurial place, this technology transfer occurs to spin out companies that start up out of MIT taking a licensed MIT technology, as well as licensing to other existing companies, small or large, that might be interested in applying MIT technology and techniques to their current problems and to solving and bringing products to market to benefit the public. So what does it take to commercialize technology? It takes a number of different things. It requires a combination of a number of things that are listed here on the slide, as well as several slides and many others. It starts with an investment in basic technology, research into techniques and new thoughts that are often way ahead of their times, quite honestly. It takes time to allow those concepts and thoughts of basic technology to develop enough to actually allow people to think about how they might apply to real world problems rather than just scientific problems. Once that amount of information is known, then there's a consideration as to whether there is actually intellectual property that might be protected via patenting or copywriting, and proceeding with that. All of these things do require cooperation from the creators of the technology that has been formed. The transfer of the technology, in my experience, in industry and in the university, the technology is usually early stage. It is usually not self-explanatory, so that someone can't just read about it and then go and duplicate it, no matter how well it's published or patented. So it really takes the help of the people who have made it. Then once there is this intellectual property and an interest in transferring the technology, then there are legal processes, there are contracts that allow parties that would like to use the technology, that give them some of the rights to use it. Usually at MIT, the ownership is maintained by MIT, but rights to use it, sometimes exclusively for certain applications or non-exclusively, can be transferred and negotiated and transferred. And then under the umbrella of those kinds of agreements, then the translation with the help of the creators occurs from the laboratory or the bench into the party that's going to devote resources, both human resources and financial resources, to create now a product concept as opposed to a technology looking for a problem to solve. In parallel with this, in order to transfer technology successfully and get it to market, there needs to be an exploration of what are the needs of the markets, who are the potential customers, and make sure that the technology is going to meet their needs. All of these different stages take investment, and that investment, of course, grows the closer you're trying to get to actually developing a product. And then once a product is actually produced, a designed product as opposed to a technology, the company that is making it available to the public has to create distribution channels and supply chains, manufacturing processes, all of those. All of these take a high degree of investment, increasing investment in funds and people, a lot of patience because it takes a significant length of time. I have a slide that shows some of that later on, but sometimes it can take as much as 10 years or more to get technology to the market, especially in some areas like pharmaceuticals or very, very large manufacturing capability. And lots of help and support that we've been talking about here over the last 2 days as it applies to Colombia. This just gives a little bit of a snapshot of what the local environment that I worked at MIT was all about. We're in a different environment here, and that's good, and it's very important to understand the differences. But MIT, the Boston area particularly, is a significant center of higher education with 52 universities and colleges there. Hundreds of thousands of students, so the population of Boston expands enormously from September until May, and then the summer is actually quite quiet, or they're replaced by tourists. Major teaching hospitals, teaching universities. It's been a focus of the venture investment community, which is important for knowledge transfer and bringing technology to market, both in venture investors and angel investors, earlier stage investors. There are over 50 accelerators and incubators where startups can jump into a sort of a safe community with other like-minded early stage companies and learn from one another, as well as a very significant industrial presence, particularly of the pharmaceutical industries, and high tech. This is a snapshot of a map as you have it of the MIT campus. The red buildings are the actual MIT facilities, the academic facilities and laboratories and whatever. To give you a little bit of a scale, the horizontal domain here on this map is maybe 2 kilometers in Cambridge, Massachusetts. And all of the other signs around here are companies and VCs from various industries, especially energy, information technology. A lot of bioscience and pharma have moved to the vicinity of the MIT campus to be able to be closer to learning from MIT as it's happening, and particularly to have access to MIT students as employees. This is a major driver of the local economy. Just to give a sense of the research budget of MIT and how it's grown over many years, the scale here goes all the way back to 1940. I'm not sure how pertinent that is. But particularly on the right-hand side of this curve, you can see that MIT and Lincoln Laboratories, which is a government lab that is managed by MIT on the outskirts of Boston. The total research budget of the two of those that the MIT Technology Licensing Office manages the inventions from is approaching $2 billion US. Of that, approximately 750 million US dollars is on the Cambridge MIT campus, and about 25% of that is industrially funded by many of those companies who were on the previous map and others, and much of that is company founded. There's a significant amount of philanthropic, foundational funding, and probably 60% of it is funded by the US government. This is a common thing in the States, maybe here also, but the substantial amount of funding of basic research is done by the government. And then you can see the size of Lincoln Laboratory. Lincoln Laboratory research is is a very different kind of thing. We don't have to go into the details, but it's because it's really designed to be defense research, much more related to defense. And as a result, it isn't driven by the same kind of publishing and presenting that the campus research is, and that affects technology transfer in a fairly major way. But the U.S. government is increasingly interested in seeing the technology, even from the government labs, make its way into the public, not just for U.S. government use. This is a common chart in technology transfer, in the technology transfer world of the technology transfer life cycle, starting with a research investment at the top, working its way around clockwise through invention, disclosure of inventions, protection of IP, marketing of that of that now asset, which is a patent or a copyright, licensing technology to parties that will raise money and invest it in creating products along the lines of what I mentioned on earlier slides, developing products and getting it to into the market to benefit the public. So again, just to sort of give you a sense of the scale of MIT's machine in technology transfer that has grown over much of that 80 years on the previous slide. There are about 700 invention disclosures that are submitted to the TLO every year. Of those 700, something more than 300 have patent applications that are filed. Many of the others either are too early, or they may not be patentable, or it just doesn't seem like it's a good investment for patents. Much of it is software, which generally isn't patented. The overall summation of 300 or 400 patent applications each year had led to 354 US patents being issued in the last fiscal year. Down in the bottom, there are 750 technology summaries with more of a business focus. What's the problem being solved? That's part of our marketing. We don't do a lot of marketing, admittedly, for a variety of reasons we can talk about later. All of this focus of reviewing inventions, filing to protect IP is designed, and marketing is designed to create licenses to entities that will now develop the technology. MIT itself doesn't develop products. MIT creates early stage technologies. And what that produced in the last fiscal year was 145 license agreements and pre-licenses, which are called options. 27 startups were created that licensed much of that technology, and some of it went to other entities. So it's a big machine of research, creating technology, protecting, creating a large patent portfolio, licensing it, and much of that, not all of it, but much of that goes to startups. This is another view of the same that shows the bar graph down in the bottom right is really showing the summary of this over a period of time. The white thin bars are the same numbers from the last chart, but the rest of it is a summation over a long period of time. And this is really just designed to show that MIT has been this kind of machine, even though it has grown for a very long period of time. And it's a broad base of technology. The circle chart there, which may not be easily readable, basically shows that the technologies are fairly even distributed, at least the startups that spin out, fairly evenly distributed between physical sciences and engineering, life sciences, therapeutics, medical devices, diagnostics, things like that, and software. It's almost a third, a third, a third. So it's a broad base of technology. That's noteworthy, especially in that MIT does not have a medical school or a teaching hospital. So for a third of the startups to be spinning out in the life sciences is a testament to sort of the collaboration with the other life science organizations in the Boston area, the teaching hospitals particularly, which are very prominent, and moving forward together with them. Again, over the longer term, I'm sorry, this isn't quite up to date, but this is a bit of a glimpse of MIT's history in creating startups, which has often been in the order of 20 to 35 or more startups over decades now. And on this chart, what you see is that the blue bars above the center line are the ones that are still existing, and the red bars are ones that no longer, that have since closed for one reason or another. What's surprising to me of this is if you look at over 10 years, and it's way more than that, the surprising percentage of them have quite long life. I think that flies in the face of what most people think about with startups, which is that a few of them will succeed for the long term and most of them fail. So I'm going to review a little bit on the next few slides of the various roles the Technology Licensing Office plays in this large ecosystem, and then I'll move to sort of the other aspects, the other contributors in the ecosystem. So first and foremost, we are at Massachusetts Institute of Technology. It is an educational institution of some note, and the TLO, as part of that, has an educational mission in everything that we do. The focus of that education is often surrounding intellectual property and what the value of that is and what the details of that are, and then the commercial aspects of licensing and startups and those related things. So we work very closely to develop relationships with faculty and students over a long period of time, way before they may be thinking about commercialization of their technology, either through a startup or through licensing to another party. We teach in various classes on campus, either part of a regular courses curriculum, maybe one or two classes, or MIT is organized into a 2-semester system with a January term that's optional, that has all sorts of much more interesting topical courses. It's called Independent Activities Period, or IAP. And the TLO has a series of about a dozen classes that it teaches on all various aspects of intellectual property and commercialization during that IAP period. We do a lot of mentoring. Students are often coming to us to talk about, well, you know, I'm only a second or third year graduate student, but I'd like to take my technology forward into a company when I'm done. And what should I be thinking about now? And how do I take advantage of everything that MIT has to offer, which is almost overwhelming. There's so much of it. And in general, Lita Nelson, who was sort of the founder of the MIT Technology Licensing Office in the 1980s and a luminary in the field, now retired, she liked to call technology transfer a contact sport, because invariably all of us in the field need to be having contact with the inventors, with licensees, with all of the different players in the field on a regular basis. It can't be emphasized enough. Then the next role is, most importantly, is that the TLO, using MIT funding, makes a long-term investment in a broad intellectual property portfolio. As we said, we file 350 patents each year. That's a major investment, to those of you who know sort of the details of what the costs are. And that is MIT's decision, made by people like myself when I was there, that I could see the potential value of this enough that it would get licensed, could get licensed, and bring back at least payment of the patent expenses. MIT's investment and the way we do in general, I think the overall portfolio patent investment is reimbursed to an extent of about 60%, which I think is a pretty big number. And when it comes to foreign filings, which we do much more carefully because they're so expensive, it's more like 90%. But we're making a business decision whether to file a patent or not. It's not because we like an inventor, and sometimes that leads to some difficult discussions, as many of you know. As I said, it's important to maintain relationships with the inventors over a long period of time, to advise them on the part that the TLO plays in helping them realize their commercial ambitions for moving their technologies out, but also the much broader scope that I'll show in a future slide of resources that are available to MIT and can be quite complicated and confusing. We work directly to connect inventors with a network of entrepreneurs and investors. I wouldn't say that the TLO is the primary connecting force for faculty particularly. They are remarkably well connected at MIT, both in industry and with the investment community. But we play some role in that. We will market technologies, some specific technologies, as I pointed out on the life cycle chart, more commonly the general university capabilities of research, so that industry particularly might come and be interested in supporting more research. Marketing is not a strength of MIT. And with all of the resources that are around MIT that it's blessed with, it really wasn't necessary to do a lot of marketing. People came to MIT to look for technologies. I know that's not something that most universities are blessed with. And as a result, what few marketing efforts that I personally made over 15 years were highly unsuccessful because I wasn't skilled at it. I had no training in it. No one in the office really had training in it. So we rely more on MIT's reputation, faculty members' reputation, and their work out in the economic environment to attract licensees. Once there is a licensee sitting across the table, the key precept at MIT has always been negotiate fair terms and get the deal done. This is not MIT, has again, going back to Lita Nelson, has always had the philosophy, the technology needs to get out in the hands of people who are going to make products out of it. That's not the people in the TLO. So the more technologies we can get out, that's how we would measure whether we're successful or not whether we make another 2% royalty on a product or bring in another $100,000 or $1 million. Then again, in the contact sport principle here, once a technology is licensed, it's not, okay, let's sign this agreement and let's all move on and let them do what they're doing. We do keep in touch with them. Licenses actually have some terms that require them, it's called diligence, that requires them to actually invest in the technology and commit to a timeline to get products to market, and we monitor that very carefully. So we have as close relationships with our licensees in an ongoing fashion as we do with our inventors and the rest of the MIT community, to sort of see how they're doing. Now, part of that, I personally would visit as many of the local licensees as I could, or even if I traveled, I would take an extra day and visit them to see how they were doing, because it was more meaningful to be there than to talk with them on the phone or over Zoom. Mostly the principle was get the deals done. Don't make them perfect, make them meaningful and important, and cover what's necessary. Some of the other areas, and I probably have touched on some of this already, some of the factors that contribute to MIT's success is the prominence of its research. It's a very entrepreneurial community, so that, and historically has been that for a long time, so that faculty often come to MIT. They're attracted to MIT because they're interested in being more entrepreneurial than they were at their previous position. And once there, even if faculty didn't come for that, they find themselves surrounded by other faculty colleagues who are actively involved in moving their technology out and maybe even actively involved in appropriate role with their startups. And they start to learn from that and start to ask questions about that. Student entrepreneurship is epidemic at every level of the university. and to a beneficial thing. And we'll see more about that in a little bit. IP policies are quite clear. I know Colombia university has been working very carefully on that. That's a real key piece, so that everybody knows what the practices are, what the policies are. It's a vital key element here. There's been a long-term investment in IP, a startup ecosystem that I'll show more about in a minute. And I think one other point here is a very, very strong volunteer community at MIT working to mentor and support startups. It's something I've actually been doing since I retired earlier this year, is that I chose to get involved as a volunteer mentor in 2 or 3 organizations that I worked with when I was at the Institute, but really trying to share and help entrepreneurs learn how to spin their companies out and what they need to be thinking about. And the overall goal in making these licensing deals, as Diego showed earlier, is that we've always had the blessing of being able to work not only with all these resources, but we've been able to bias ourselves towards getting technology out and making an impact by getting technology out, rather than worrying about how much revenue we bring into the university. We do happen to, we are cash positive, which is a rare thing in the technology transfer field, but it's not because that's how we run the business. We run the business to get technologies transferred, foster it before, during, and after that transfer. And if we get more of those out, even a small number of those being very successful will also happen to make us financially successful, but it's not the goal. A few key policies. MIT owns the IP, just as the university does here, that's created, whether it's federally funded or even if it's industrially funded. MIT does not perform industrial sponsored research that I would call sort of work for hire. Even if it's industrially funded, it has to be an academic project that a faculty member wants to do and carries out the academic mission first. And obviously it has to be of interest to industry or they're not going to pay for it. But the ownership of the IP is at least partially by MIT, and that enables us to keep open doors and not have such complicated ownership of new technology that it can't be useful. Industrial sponsors, in return for their funding, do not receive ownership, but they do receive a first right to license the technology, either non-exclusively or exclusively. So although they wouldn't have ownership, if there's a technology that was important enough for them that they really wanted to control it, they could license it exclusively. Interestingly enough, and it's a topic for another time, most sponsors, industrial sponsors, do not license their technology, even non-exclusively. And they certainly don't license it exclusively. Now, personally, I think the main reason for that is that they really don't, their competitive advantage, unlike a startup that has nothing but an exclusive license and enthusiasm. A big company has a brand name, it has a whole market presence, it has a lot of other strengths, and they use research support at MIT as a way of deriving access to state-of-the-art processes and thinking and students for future employment, but they're not looking to have a key technology created at a university that now is going to be the foundation of the next generation of the company. There are limits on the use of MIT facilities and resources by industry, again, to make sure that the academic mission of the university is not in conflict with industrial needs. And under MIT policies, if technology is protected and licensed and revenue comes back to MIT under that license, the distribution of that revenue is as it shows on this slide. A third of it goes to the inventors as a group. A third of it goes to the inventors' home departments for research and educational purposes at their discretion. and a third goes to the MIT General Fund for research and educational purposes. I'll just leave it at that. And then the last bullet here is there are very clear rules that govern what kinds of roles faculty can take in their outside activities, including in a startup. Faculty, for example, are allowed to have an advisory role in a startup. They could even be the chief technology officer for some period of time. They cannot run the company. So an MIT faculty member interested in spinning out their technology is more of an advisor and can spend a certain percentage of their time on that as an outside professional activity. A very key, it's not on these slides, I think anywhere, but a very key element to the spin-outs at MIT, especially technology transfer through spin-outs, is really the students. Because the students are the ones who, when they're done, they leave MIT, they go to a startup, they commit their lives for some period of time to really moving this technology forward. There are no limits to what they can do once they leave MIT. The faculty don't generally leave MIT. It's very rare. So their role has to be guided by these policies. In the spirit of being overwhelming here, I have a couple of slides that sort of capture part of the MIT ecosystem that supports entrepreneurship and innovation. I'll highlight just a few things. There are two slides. The first one are actual programs on campus. Although they are not paid for by MIT, they raise money independently. But to give you a sense of what kinds of things that they support, in the middle, in the whole center of the slide is the Technology Licensing Office. We are self-sustaining by our revenues. The provost does pay some of our expenses, but certainly not the vast majority of that. Up above that on the top is the Martin Trust Center for MIT Entrepreneurship at the Sloan School for Management, a very vital driver with many kinds of programs for entrepreneurship at MIT that's part of interdisciplinary education at MIT. In the upper left is something called the Venture Mentoring Service. This is an organization of over 200 volunteer mentors, volunteers who bring various experiences from the startup world, from the venture world, from intellectual property world, from large companies, investors, who give freely of their time to do team mentoring of startups who apply to become part of this VMS program. VMS actually has an outreach program where they train other locations in the world to develop their own venture mentoring service. And I believe a group in Manizales has actually worked with them for 5 or 6 years now, quite productively. Another interesting program, sort of 2/3 of the way down the right-hand side of this slide, is the Deshpande Center for Technological Innovation. The Deshpande Center was created 20 years ago and funds research still at MIT. So in a way, it's sort of, it funds further research with a focus on making the technology more attractive to spin out an investment after 1 or 2 years. So it comes with mentorship also, as many of these programs do. And the goal is to add modest amounts of money to research to focus the researchers towards what has to be proven to that an investor would want to put money in when a startup is created. And there are networking events that go on during the 1 or 2 years of funding. There are technology showcases. There are a number of things that are really valuable to those companies. Over 20 years, I think there have been 50 or 60 startups that have spun out of Deshpande funding, and they've raised billions of dollars of money accordingly. One other prominent thing on here in the sort of almost upper left is the MIT ILP, the Industrial Liaison Program. This goes back 70 or 80 years, and it's sort of it's a MIT concierge service that companies, large companies mostly in this case, will pay a certain annual fee to get customized knowledge and access of the research going on in MIT and programs that are going on to MIT that would be. So there's an industrial presence, there's a startup presence, there's before companies, there's after companies, you know, all very dynamic and as complicated as it looks on this slide, quite honestly. I won't go through any of these. These are student-focused groups that are driven by the students. They raise money. Many of them have business plan competitions that are quite sought after and quite competitive each year. And probably one other one that's interesting, the Innovation Initiative down near the lower right was created to help entrepreneurs and help people who are interested in commercialization work their way through the morass and the complication of all of these, of this ecosystem. I won't go through this slide, but you can see some of the same organizations here play at different stages of the development process over many of them, but you can see from sort of very early stages with something with the Lemelson program and Start MIT to Delta V and VMS, which is more when companies are being spun out and getting ready to go to product. MIT has because of all this richness on campus and around campus, MIT has historically not had its own incubator or accelerator to move technology forward into startups. As a small step in contributing to that, though, 5 years ago, MIT added seed funding, I think it was $25 million, to create something called the Engine. The Engine is not on the MIT campus. It's near it. It's one of those things on the map that I put up earlier. Its mission is to really work on what it calls tough tech, where it's a venture firm, so it operates on a profit motive. It has limited partners whose money then the Engine invests in a bunch of startups, many of them MIT, but not limited to MIT, many others in the Boston and outside the Boston area. But it's focusing on tough technologies, meaning technologies that may take longer than the normal venture investment horizon allows. And it has a bunch of parts. So it has a fund, which since it was founded 5 years ago, has raised over $600 million. MIT essentially put the first money in the pot, but is a small investor now in what was totally created. And there's a significant amount of other support that's created here. There's an infrastructure, there's essentially lab space and tools, and which is expanding very rapidly. They have now over 200,000 square feet for teams to be in. They just took over a major facility that I worked in as a young man many years ago, working for Polaroid Corporation. Polaroid went away and the building has been empty and owned by MIT. And now the Engine is renting it, I think, from MIT to create this lab space and communal space for 60 startups to really learn from one another. And then there's a huge networking component and specific programs that the professionals who run the Engine fund add their expertise from their previous knowledge to help startups learn how to get going and then graduate and move out of the Engine into the real world. The Engine is one of many kinds of lab spaces and incubators around the Boston and Cambridge area. Many of these, I mean, CIC in the bottom right, it was actually in the building that I worked, where the tech transfer office was, and across the street in another building. Lab Central is another one that's about 300 yards up the street. So this is all often very co-located with a lot of common support of mentorship, funding, networking, and learning from one another, some common facilities for people. Now, I wanted to focus, aside from sort of the scale of what I've talked about, which is one thing that makes MIT sort of unusual. These are some of the items that I may have already touched on, but I just want to make sure that I covered them all. MIT is a very vibrant entrepreneurial place that covers everyone. It's hard to escape at MIT. The inventors, the faculty members, and the students, but the faculty members are very often interested in seeing their technologies developed. That's not often true at universities. And I know people who have, colleagues at other universities who struggle to get faculty interested in seeing their technology brought to benefit the public. Volunteerism is everywhere, and each of these programs have volunteer mentors and people who share their knowledge. MIT, as I mentioned earlier, MIT research has a very significant presence of industrial funding. Again, it's still academically focused research, but something like 25% of the research on campus is funded by industry. I think probably the US average for that is less than 5%. So this brings this in conjunction with MIT being multidisciplinary, but very focused as an engineering school, first and foremost. This brings a great reality and practicality to the research at MIT that makes more of it, I think, marketable and of obvious interest to parties on the outside to move it into market than some academic research. Mentoring is very important. Business concepts are taught as part of many of the technical programs at MIT. So there are lots of multidisciplinary education that brings students along to thinking about business aspects as they are complementary to their technical expertise that they're learning. And there are lots of different ways of moving forward successfully. That's what makes some of the chaos of the ecosystem slides I put up, but it's a good chaos sometimes. So obviously this could seem all overwhelming to, and I've dealt with this, as I said, around the world in dealing with other universities. This can be quite overwhelming to say, well, we don't have a lot of these things here. Where would we begin in putting these things together? And what I've tried to do is put together a bit of a list of some of the things that I've talked about that at the right time may be considered here as things that could transfer. So entrepreneurial education is something that probably, either in conjunction with your business school or with your knowledge transfer offices or some of each. Some of it's happening already that I heard this morning in presentations. Entrepreneurial education is very important, and just because someone is getting a bachelor's or a master's or a PhD degree in a technology doesn't mean that they can't learn more about the real world and what it takes to make something happen with that technology. The proof of concept funding, like the Deshpande Center or a few other programs at MIT, is a very valuable way of moving technologies forward while still in the comfort of the academic world, in the womb, the academic womb, to make it more attractive at the right time for outside entities to support financially and for customers to see the use of the technology. Venture mentoring can enter into every aspect of this. It's something that I've gotten involved with in my retirement, and really enjoy giving back that way and sharing the limited scope of all of this that I know and that I've learned. These business plan competitions are something that I know have translated around the world to different areas where student enthusiasm can really make an enormous amount of excitement over a number of months or even a whole academic year at the various stages of pulling together student teams, both business and academic and scientific, to think through and make a business case for analyze technologies and how they might move forward into the real world. Part of these different things can be technology showcasing. I have done this in other parts of the world where events will be created to connect the academic technologies that are being worked on, the academic strengths, with the local investment and industrial communities. You know, in one place in the Middle East, we created one of these and showcased probably 24 technologies. And the people from industry who literally came from research centers that were a kilometer at the edge of campus, a kilometer down the hill, were amazed at what was going on at the university, and they had no idea. There was no dialogue going on. So there's, and technology showcasing isn't necessarily just giving a talk like this, but it's actually crafting it in a way so that the technology is talked about in terms of what's the problem being solved and how might this be applicable to your business. And it breaks down into small, like academic poster sessions where people who might be interested can walk around and talk one-on-one or one-on-two with the people who are working on the technology. Industrial outreach is very valuable and often exists in places where some of the other parts of the ecosystem may not be developed. And then accelerators and incubators like either on campus or off campus, like the Engine, like other things that are going on in other universities, can be very valuable, invaluable really, especially if some resources don't occur to help launch and advise and guide technologies through the minefield of what they face in front of them. So thank you very much for your interest. I hope a little bit of this will be useful over time, and I look forward to talking with people about it more.
Well, as you say, Jim, it's overwhelming. It's just the ecosystem is extremely dynamic. So we have time for some questions here. So the first one is, you mentioned at some point of our long conversation that this process for the university and especially for the academics to understand that they have to start this relationship with innovation, entrepreneurship, it takes time, especially with, it sometimes can be difficult for the university to try to explain to the academic people, okay, this is our path. How was that done at MIT? How was that process? I find it very interesting and complex.
So obviously I came in sort of late to the process at MIT because many of the pieces at MIT have history that goes back 20, 30, 40, 50 years. I mean, MIT was founded, you were mentioning this yesterday, MIT was founded over 150 years ago to try to help support the Industrial Revolution in the United States. And it was founded as with a mission of developing real life solutions, real practical solutions to real life problems. And as simple as that sounds, that's even though nobody teaches that to faculty or students when they come to MIT, that still permeates everything. Maybe it's the engineering focus. I don't know exactly why all of that is, but the certainly different parts of this develop over different periods of time. I think from what I've heard even yesterday and this morning, you know, some of the aspects of policies and intellectual property practices are really important to be both clear and consistent and then communicated to the faculty so that they understand that on the one hand, you really want to encourage them to submit 2 times, 3 times, 10 times the number of new inventions that they might be doing right now. But that doesn't mean that you're necessarily going to be equally enthusiastic about all of them. And it may be that some of them won't be tested, won't be patented. Those are the hardest discussions in the field of technology transfer. Is how do you explain to faculty and students that you actually, the technology is very good, but the business decision isn't supported to go ahead and invest tens of thousands of US dollars in seeking patent protection, that we don't feel that it's likely to go forward commercially. And MIT does have an intellectual property committee with deans and the director of the technology licensing office that have all continued to develop these over the years, but they've been in place for quite a long time with mostly not very much change. The ecosystem, again, is something that has evolved a significant amount and much over time, and much of that is relatively recently. I'm sorry, I don't have the slide with sort of the timeline of that. A few pieces, like the Industrial Liaison Program, goes back 70 years, but the Tech Transfer Office was created in the early 1980s, as was the Deshpande Center. The Deshpande Center for Proof of Concept Funding and the Venture Mentoring Service were created in around 2002, I think. So these things all continue to meet needs as they evolve. And I think, to me, the efforts that you're making to start with sharing all of the individual efforts that have been going on at your different campuses, in enlightening one another and learning from one another, then you'll be able to step back from that and start to prioritize what's the next most important one or two things that you can do and move at it, so that you can't try to create an entire ecosystem at one time. You have to think about what will be most important, perhaps even on each campus, because I did hear that this morning. It may not be the same for all the campuses, but there will be some general things, and I'm excited to see how you're going about it.
Okay, we had so many questions here, so we don't have time to cover, but I will okay, I will allow myself to ask you something that is very important, especially to me, because I work with the students, and I have seen how in MIT the ecosystem also is fed by a lot of organization by students. And when I remember that we were talking about this, why you do that, and you say we do this for impact and not for income. But at the same time, I mean, MIT really understands the role of the students in the whole process. So at the end, the real ones who are receiving any advantage of the system are the students, more than the university. I mean, the reputation of the university is fantastic, but how it's part of the culture of MIT to be centered around the students, because here I feel that our universities are more centered in the professors and the academic. How is that relationship, and how MIT encourage the students even to form all these organizations?
Yeah. And again, some of this I can only speculate at, because it's been a long history of it. But I think MIT for quite some time has really encouraged students to identify things that they're passionate about, and then to try to find other like-minded students to create these, sometimes small and then sometimes growing into larger organizations. You know, the 100K business plan competition, which is very, very prominent and known all around the world, started not just because of inflation, started as a 25K business plan competition. That's the total prize money. There are some that are even less than that. A spin out, and that was, I think that was probably 30 years ago. So some students said, probably particularly from the business school, and there were some academic courses that were joint between the business school and the engineering school to think about the business of technology. And I think some of them said, well, why don't we try to create more spark over this? Academic courses with good teachers, I'm sure, can be really exciting, but they're still courses, and they even if they're a life lab, like we were hearing this morning earlier, there are limits to sort of the enthusiastic spark that can come from that, whereas students can really create an enormous buzz. The business plan competitions, many of them, will fill the entire hall at MIT with like 1,500 people coming in and cheering for the different teams as they're presenting, and as sort of professional judges then give out the prizes. It's amazingly exciting. I don't think I answered your question.
No, but I find that very, very interesting. Okay, the last question, I will try to comprise them two different aspects, but in the office, in the technology license office, how many kind of programs and how many people actually how many programs you really perform at the office, and how many people work at the office?
So there are something over 50 people in the office. About half of those people are the professional licensing team. People like myself when I was there, a licensing officer, and who come with some combination of industrial experience, technical experience, and business experience to help make the decisions on a case-by-case, invention-by-invention basis as to whether to invest MIT money in seeking patent protection with a goal of ultimately commercializing it by licensing. There are younger people, half of the licensing team are young associates who come right out of school and learn sort of many aspects of the business. They do more administrative things, but they participate sort of shoulder to shoulder with the officers in learning how to do things. And then the other half of the office are a variety of very important administrative functions. There's an intellectual property group. There's a finance group. Obviously, we bring a lot of money in. We distribute all that money. At the end of the fiscal year, the TLO has zero because it's all given out. There's a compliance group, because with all of this sponsored research comes obligations on an invention by invention, sponsor by sponsor basis. So you can imagine what the administrative burden of that is. Beyond that, so that just covers administratively, how do we do our business, taking in and processing inventions and making decisions and doing something with them. Beyond that, it's really more ad hoc or informal as to how people like me get involved in doing other things in the MIT community or beyond the MIT community. There are certain programs. I talked about the independent activities period where the office teaches like a dozen courses on various aspects that are of interest. There is a presence, all sort of volunteer from within the office on different events that happen on campus. But as I can speak for myself, when I was there, I got involved with the Deshpande Center. I got involved with another proof of concept program. I got involved with the MIT Energy Initiative to sort of support overall programs there and other things totally out of my interest, to be honest with you. And it is today in a new hybrid economy, where some people are remote at one time, some people in person. It's actually hard to maintain some of that discretionary kind of work.
Thank you very much. Really. Now is the second part of the talk, so I invite Magali Maida and representing Bogota campus, Aida Fukere, who is our leader and this in Bogota. So thank you.
Thank you, Diego. Now we change the language. Now the next presentation is in Spanish. Bienvenida, Magali. Nosotros hemos invitado acá a Magali Maida, quien nos va a hacer la siguiente intervención de acompañamiento a spin-off, que son emprendimientos de base científica y tecnológica. Magali Maida ha sido subdirectora de la Oficina de Transferencia de Tecnología de la Universidad Católica de Chile y actualmente asesora continuamente esta oficina. Además, ha sido consultora del Consejo Nacional de Investigaciones Técnicas y Científicas de Argentina, y pues tiene vasta experiencia en temas de propiedad intelectual, tanto derecho de autor, propiedad industrial, diferentes mecanismos de conservación y de respetar estos derechos de propiedad intelectual y del licenciamiento que se hace desde las oficinas universitarias. Entonces, bienvenida Magali y pues muchas gracias por atender este llamado, que además también nos están viendo por las redes de la Vicerrectoría de Investigación, otras entidades universitarias que hacen parte de la red de transferencia e innovación de Bogotá y seguramente también de todo el país. Entonces, bienvenida y el auditorio es tuyo.
Gracias. Yo soy usuaria de Apple. ¿Cómo hago para ponerlo en grande? Pantalla completa, perdón. En casa de herrero, cuchillo de palo. Transferencia tecnológica y siempre tengo problemas tecnológicos. Okay, so I will start in English. First thing I'm going to say is that I was joking yesterday and not joking that much that being after gym, it's like being invited to play it after Coldplay or I don't know. And so it's going to be hard for me. As in this topic, Jim is really an expert. I would like to highlight some of the points I'm going to lecture in English for him to feel free to interact. Also, Vicente. As I have an hour, I cannot stop at every time, but I will try to give a space for others to interact. If you need, you can raise your hand or whatever. So I'm going to talk about spin-off companies, and when I say spin-off companies, I'm talking about startup companies that are coming out of scientific research. Yes, I mean, for the purpose of this conversation, I have in mind an idea of what a spin-off company is. I will talk later about that, and I will start with some context, and this context has a lot to do with questions that I'm always being asked. It's not the way of working on fostering these spin-offs out of the university per se, but there's some issues that are always in the mind of people. How do we do that? Is this the case? Is there a rule for this? What is your advice on this? So I will have a couple of slides at the beginning. Just to clarify some context, in my experience, having said this, always remember, I have said this in the internal session for Universidad Nacional yesterday, but having said this, this is not a recipe, none of what not even what Jim, who is like the leading expert in the field, in the world probably in this matters, says it's a rule. You should take whatever you think it's best and try to adapt it, and that's the key word, adapt it to your need. And what's even within Colombia, and even within, let's say, Universidad Nacional, it's not the same, the reality of the different campuses. So just try to find what it sounds interesting from what we are saying, and try to see whether to adapt that. And what I'm going to talk about, and sorry, I'm giving a lot around the explanation, is what I enthusiastically took from other experiences. I spent the first 10 years of my I've been working in the field for 19 years. It's a lot, I know. I started really young, but I'm not that young anymore. And what I've learned is that I forced trying to implement brilliant things that were going on in the United States, in Israel, in Europe, in Argentina first, because I'm Argentinian originally, and then in Chile. And then I found out that wasn't the good thing to do. The good thing is to take ideas and adapt them, even if when the final product you're implementing, it's different, very different, because we have to not only adapt them, technically speaking, in terms of resources, but we also need to adapt them. That's the most important thing, to adapt culturally to what to our culture, to our ecosystem, to our university, etc. So then I'm going to move forward to what we do to help. In my experience, what we did at Católica and other institutions, but mostly at Católica, to foster spin-off companies. And I will talk a little about the decision of a researcher mainly, but also students or in general a research team to decide to start a spin-off company, how to help that decision or that decision process. Then I will talk about the needs of support they do have, at least in our countries. It's a general thing, but in our countries, those needs, the help in the business model and the value proposition have some things to consider, which have to do to our culture, to our way of work, to the lack of resources and others. I will talk about the team, how to build a good team, how to advise on the building of a good team. I will talk about resources, which is a huge topic. And I will talk about networks, because we do not have the MIT ecosystem. And therefore, what in my experience works is to help those entrepreneurs to build their networks and to participate in those networks that are already there for the university, even when they are not initiatives from the university. And then a couple of other learnings. So I will start with the context. Is this a PDF version? Because it has some transitions. Okay, I won't use the transitions. You're going to see a lot of text. The idea was that the transitions help that. So when I'm talking about a spin-off company, I'm talking about un emprendimiento basado en resultados de investigación. A startup company which starts with research results. This is, in some occasions, you will find innovation in the business model, but that's, for me, for the purpose of this talk, it's not a spin-off company. It's research results arising from either research labs or sophisticated research projects of students in, let's say, in Colombia, Los Semilleros, for instance, where you have interactions between professors, students, and either other members of the community. There could be an interaction of other people from outside, either people from companies or others. And in those spin-off companies, for me, there has to be at least, could be an academic, would be a professor, but could also be jointly with the professor or alone students of any kind, undergraduate students, postgraduate students, doctorate students, postdocs, I mean, a member of the community, yes? Because you have two elements here, the technology. Of course, there is a protection for that technology, if that is the case. In most of the cases, that is the case, and that is needed to robust the value proposition. And then you have at least one member, maybe more, often more members of the academic community that are participating, that most of the times are partners of that company. They have shares of that company, and sometimes some of them have, some of them don't. And they have a license to exploit the technology. And why they need a license? Because it's very simple. They are legally a separate entity for the university. So whenever you have IP from the university and you have a company willing to exploit that IP, whether it's a spin-off company coming out of the university or where it's an outside company, you need a license to exploit the technology. If not, the university can contest, can argue against that use or exploitation of the technology. Yes, so you need a license all of the times. And there is an issue which is the right, and even if the professor who developed or the person from the university community developed the technology has shares in the company, they still need a license from the university, and there is where the technology transfer office gets involved in negotiating that license. And one thing that I'm always asked about is when it's the right time for this idea of a new company becomes officially, incorporates, se registra societaria, se crea una nueva sociedad, creates a new company, yes? And for me, in my experience, and when I started helping spin-off companies, we were thinking in the KPIs, en los indicadores de éxito, and we were measured by licenses, we were measured by companies created, and companies created with license of the technologies. And at that time, I'm talking about 8 years ago, 7 years ago, even 6 years ago, we said, oh, we should speed the incorporation of the company. I mean, they want to create a company, let's create the company, let's license the technology, and then, as I've learned in other countries, if they are entrepreneurs, if they are real entrepreneurs, they will succeed. They will succeed. They will find the ways of going through these, and they will take courses, and they will take advantage of resources within the university and outside the university, and they will succeed. Well, in my experience, that recipe didn't work. So what I've learned in my experience is that, and what I advise to this spin-off wannabes, that we call them joke, aquellos que quieren conformar emprendimientos, is that this is a long process. Of course, we can speed that up as much as we can if the team gets involved and spend a lot of time in moving forward this spin-off company. So we will move as fast as the team wants it to move. But our suggestion, 100% of the times, is that first you have to really decide whether you want to do it. You build a team, and that would be a process. I will talk about that later. Then you have to do other things, and one of those things is thinking of your business model and your value proposition. You have to robust that, and that's not only, please, this is very important. This is not only having a PowerPoint presentation following the ABC rules or like a pitch deck. That's not having a business model. Of course, that's a very efficient way of showing your business model to a potential investor or to a potential mentor or to whomever wants to help you. But that's not, I mean, I know I travel a lot through Latin America and help a lot of universities in this process. And what we were told at some point, all of us, all Latin America, is that you need to have presentation, and that's it, and then you will get investment. And it's not having a nice presentation, it's having a good business model, it's not only having a good presentation, it's you need to work on your business. And for me, don't speed your incorporation as a company, just be ready. And when you're ready, when you have a robust value proposition, a business model, only then incorporate as a company. And in the process, we can start negotiating the license agreement so that when you get incorporated, we sign the license agreement. But for dealing the license agreement, we cannot think in the royalties like an abstract concept. It's like, let's say 5%, 3%, and increasing royalty depending on, no, we need not only the business model, but we need the numbers, we need the Excel to see whether that royalty or that compensation, that consideration for the license, could be royalties, would be milestones, would be other ways of giving back to the university in exchange for the license, whether that flies in time and not only theoretically speaking. ¿Sí? El punto es, necesitamos que la empresa se constituya, o al menos mi consejo es que las empresas se constituyan en el momento en que tienen lo otro resuelto. Porque ¿qué pasa si no? Conforman la empresa y salen a levantar capital. And when they think that they just need a PowerPoint presentation and an incorporation, and they go and talk to, let's say, VCs, angels, or whomever would invest in them. But the problem is that when they are asked questions, they don't have answers. And it's okay not to have all the answers, but at least you need some answers, right? And so I know, you will tell me you don't need an incorporation for going to talk to investors. But ideally, you would think that investors would come after you already have the company in place. At least in our countries, it works that way. You have the company incorporated, and then they get into the equations with their shares. Sometimes it doesn't happen that way, but at least in our countries, it usually happens that, or in my experience, happens that way. So my advice is that not all the times, but most of the times, wait until you're ready. And the other things that I would say, wait, is that when you start, another thing that we were told is that go to every entrepreneurship contest and you need to win a lot of prizes. And you know what I've seen that happens is that professors spend the little time they have in preparing for contests and winning contests, but they never get to the market to raise money. They don't work on their business model. They just go for competitions. And in our countries, competitions don't get that much into the business model in general. So what happens is that for investors, when you go to an investor and say, I have all these prizes and what else did you do? And they have a lot of questions and don't have a robust business model, then what's going on there? I mean, we should deliver results. We should have a route saying, una hoja de ruta, saying I should do this and that, and all this should be validated. Well, I'll move forward. I'm a little all over the place. So what means then a spin-off company is officially considered a spin-off company? And here is a big issue for universities. As a university, I am approving that a professor would be part of us, or a member of my community will take shares of a spin-off company. Do we need to approve that? Are we approving the license because it's university IP? Are we validating that they can be named as a spin-off company of the university? Are we allowing them to use the trademarks of the university? Do they have obligations? Do they have benefits by being spin-off companies? For instance, in Universidad Católica de Chile, when a company becomes a spin-off company, when they are validated, we don't approve, we validate them as a spin-off company, they have preferential treatment, meaning we license in preferential terms, explicitly preferential terms. And I said, we don't give it for free, the technology, of course, but we don't charge as much as to an outside company. And it's not only a royalty, a smaller royalty, but also other benefits that we take special care of how to build the milestones. We are asking them to comply along with the license, and we are helping them in all this process. But we can help them even before they get validated as a spin-off company. But when they are validated as a spin-off company, they can say they are a spin-off company university, and they can use, in a way, the reference to the university. And here comes a lot of discussion on the responsibility, the legal obligation, the liability of using the university trademarks, logos, associations, and all that. Right? It's for another discussion, but there are a lot of considerations there. So what I invite you is to think, what does it mean to become a spin-off company? And for us, it's like, okay, en términos prácticos, nos interesa si es un spin-off para ver si lo contamos, y entonces contamos que we have 2 spin-offs or we have 4 spin-offs, but that's not the point of it. I mean, that's the point for communication purposes and for reporting purposes, but not the point of having a process for a company to become a spin-off company of the university, right? So you need to define what somebody wins and their obligations, or their rights and obligations when they become a spin-off company of the university. Some common doubts. What can and cannot do a spin-off company with the license IP? Okay, so it depends on the license agreement. We can allow them to build new things on that IP, to improve that IP, to develop new knowledge over that IP with us, without us. I mean, and we can establish some rules on who will own that IP, or how would be the rules for exploiting that IP derived from the original IP. And that would be decided in the license agreement, and that needs to be decided on 2 levels. One, there is an institutional, on my experience, is an institutional baseline of what we ideally want to achieve, but then on a case-by-case basis, we should understand in this particular scenario, what will the spin-off company need? Remember that we are not licensing a technology to a already established company which has other products, which has, of course, a pipeline and coming with other products or services, who also have resources and others, we are licensing most of the times to a new company with only one future product, which probably will get into the market a couple of years or a lot of years later. It depends on the field of technology. If it's pharma, it would take years to get to the market, would need tons of resources to get into the market. And they will have to deal with investors, and they will see that license agreement, to which professors don't have that much capacity to negotiate with us, and they most of them cannot afford to pay lawyers. So ellos negocian con nosotros en condiciones muy desventajosas, los emprendedores, porque no tienen acceso a abogados muchas veces, o si tienen, son abogados que tienen, no son grandes expertos en propiedad intelectual porque no pueden pagar grandes abogados. Pero ese contrato no lo tenemos que pensar como que lo estamos negociando con los académicos, que todo más o menos les da lo mismo. Lo tenemos que pensar como que es un contrato que va a enfrentarse a inversionistas in the future. And when they show this license agreement to investors, because their main asset is the IP, and the IP is tagged to, it's not their property, it's tagged to a license agreement, they will see whether the royalty or the compensation in general flies or not with the business, alongside with the business. And whether they need to improve that intellectual property, whether they have to work that with the University of Norway, whether they have to pay, how long do they have to pay to the university. I have a case where these are mathematic models for shifts, logistics and pricing. And the original models were developed within a research project in a university, but then over time, this is now a company which is very successful. It's been in the market for more than 10 years. The models they're using now are not the models that were developed at the university at all. They evolved in time, and there's no longer the model originally generated within the university. So at some point, we need to leave the royalties go. I mean, we cannot charge them forever. We need to be fair in that consideration we're putting in the license agreement. Another thing is whether the university takes or not shares in the new company. It depends. It's a university decision, and it also has to do with the laws of the country and the internal regulations of this institution. But the other thing is whether, am I excluded by, this is a very frequent question, am I excluded by taking a license, by taking shares to gain money with the licensing of the technology? ¿Se entiende? Si yo puedo tener esta doble vía de ingreso. Por un lado tengo acciones en la compañía y por el otro lado cobro un royalty por la licencia. Y la respuesta es, entiendo que no hay ninguna disposición legal en nuestros países que lo impidan. Chequéenlo en Colombia, pero entiendo que tampoco la hay. Sí hay un tema de fairness in the deal, where you cannot charge a lot. This is my personal opinion. You cannot charge a lot with the license and take a lot of shares, because that will basically make the business fail, right? So what in Católica we decided is that we are taking some shares, very little shares on the company, and because we are doing that, and because we want this spin-off company to fly, not to die within the first year, we will be benevolent in the terms of the license agreement. We will be very strict in the milestones they need to achieve and what they need to report us in order to maintain the license. But we will be more flexible in the economic terms of that license. We talk whether they need a license to have a spin-off company. They need a license to exploit the technology. So whether they are a spin-off company or not, if they are a separate entity from the university, they need a license. And there's some other issues that I think you mentioned before. I think Diego Jim, I think somebody mentioned for either today or yesterday, I'm sorry for the confusion, but can a professor creating a company use his laboratories for the company, for R&D for the company? I don't know. This is an institutional decision, probably not, or in case we accept that, that's within some rules. Can he use the time of the students for his own benefit? I mean, that there are a lot of things going on there that you need to take decisions on. I don't want to impose decisions. I think that's unfair, and that they use the space and the time and the resources of the university for their personal gain, and most of the times that's not accepted for free, at least. And there's also matters of conflicts of time, conflicts of interest, that the professor will be involved in the company and also taking the decisions on the license, but also taking the decisions in his lab and the company. And we need to, this is not something that it's a problem. It's something that we need to think about and anticipate to potential conflicts in the future, so that everybody's clear, we all know what we need to do, and we keep friends and no problems with the university. Then another thing I'm always asked, how do we incentivize this? I mean, we know that we don't have a line of professors or students willing to emprender, right? To start a company. Well, a couple of very simple things. We need simple proceedings. We cannot make a really hard proceeding for becoming a spin-off company, because nobody's going to, I mean, we always need to remember that professors have scarce time, students have a little more time, but still, if they are taking classes, they still have very few time. So we need to make processes affordable, simple. We are already perceived as bureaucratic, as slow. So we not only need to deal with reality, but also with perception. So we need to have clear rules, simple processes. We need to trust on the efecto contagio, the contagion on somebody did it. They're having a great time doing that. And one thing we found out, it's interesting, is that to create these communities where for students, it's easier that they create their own communities. For academics, they don't, in our countries, they don't tend to create this entrepreneurial club where they share success or failure stories or learnings or how to deal with the bureaucracy of the university. So we found out that fostering that moments, or those moments of interaction between these entrepreneurs wannabes or these early starting entrepreneurs, it's great. It's great for them to share the experience. And we also found out that having them in a gathering with, let's say, high authorities, let's say the rector there or the vice rector for research there, telling them that we're proud of you. It's great that you're doing this. This makes a difference, because they are not having extra time for starting a company. They are not having extra money for starting if the company succeeds, they will, but they usually don't have much incentives for doing this. So this is great. You should still do this, or simply, our rector talking publicly on how proud the university is of the spin-off of their academic entrepreneurs or their spin-off companies, or mention one or another, or being in the events where we showcase technology, at least for 10 minutes. That's a very good sign. And of course, of the deans and other authorities, they value most. And of course, incentives. I don't need to say this. Evaluating, being this a part of the academic evaluation, this meaning transfer intellectual property, sponsored research, creating spin-off companies. It's hard to measure. I know it's a very, very difficult topic to abordar, but that's a world of difference. And please build and tell the success stories to the community. And when I say the community, it's outside. It's within the university and outside the university. And both the regions need to be seen as regions that are thriving in entrepreneurs, and also the country needs to be seen as a country, because if the country is seen in that way, then what happened with Chile is that as we got more and more good of not only Católica, but Chile in general, good spin-off companies and startup companies, and a couple of unicorns. Unicorns are those companies that worth a lot of money. Venture capital starting to come to Chile to invest. And the local venture capitals, which were very conservative and didn't want to invest in high technology spin-off companies and not companies involving university, they started to see that they were starting to sell, making money, picking investment from abroad, and so they started to put some more money. So showing success stories, even you don't need to be in the market and selling millions of dollars to be a success story. You can be the one who raised money and move forward successfully, and you can build diferentes niveles de casos de éxito, ¿sí? Para comunicar. And now I go to the how do we help them to succeed? So first thing is the decision to be an entrepreneur. And this needs to be a very conscious and informed process. They need to understand what they will address. I remember when I did an internship in Stanford, I went to a meeting with a professor who was willing to start a company, and I remember that the person from Stanford asked the professor, "Do you have kids? How old are those kids? Do you know what this will mean?" And when I get a lot of questions like that, that professor has a 2-year-old and a 4-year-old kids, and when I went out, it's like, do you really need to scare him that much? Yes, because he needs to face this. He will face a moment in time where he will miss a school event or whatever, and at least at the beginning, if he gets discouraged with this little, he won't succeed in time. So that was a learning for me. Please deal with this carefully, because in our culture, saying all this, we will never get an academic entrepreneur at least, but they need to understand what they will get to. If they don't want to be entrepreneurs, there are other ways. They can have different roles. It's not the same to be the CTO, the chief technology officer of a company, that being an advisor with some hours, or being the person developing technologies, and those technologies then being either sub-licensed to a company to create, and then sub-licensed technologies that not always a great business model, but sometimes it works, or being the one who developed technologies and then help a team to create a company, but then leave and create a new technology. And what I like is being in the lab, then I can be that person building technologies and helping first little steps of the technology, and then pass that through a team, a new team, an entrepreneurial team which will move that forward. Then, and for that you need a team. Then, is there a team? Can we make a team? In case there is a professor or professors in the equation, are they willing to give out control of a business to another person, to a commercial person, which is not probably a PhD, which is not, or in the meantime, until we have a commercial person, because sometimes we don't have money and we do need a commercial person, but sometimes the first couple of months we can work with a master degree student or another person which is not an MBA or has not a commercial background, but is someone who can start working with some help of us or a mentor in the business model. Would the professor allow that person to take them decisions? Because that would be the person putting all the time in this new company, and that's a very important thing to consider. If the professor is not willing to listen for advice, will not go to the meetings with a mentor or with us, if the professor puts somebody in charge, but then he's taking all the decisions and the other person cannot take the minimum decision in a meeting with us or with a mentor or with a third party, then is that professor a person to start a company? Well, in that case, my advice is to respectfully try to discourage them to start a company, or if they want to start a company, don't put much of your time there, because that's probably a failure. and expectations, yes? And all what I've said before, it's about handling expectation. At the end, we are people talking to people, and we need to communicate. And as in everything in life, I came to learn in my 40-something years that we are at the end, we are people talking to people, and the success or failure of anything is about expectations and good communication. So in terms of needs of support, mostly 4 big areas. Of course, the value proposition and the business model, the team, resources, and networks. And I was always asked, what comes first? I need resources to do more research, to then get somebody to invest in technology. Okay, but do you know what needs to be done for a minimum viable product? Or you are assuming that you are saying that you need to do A, B, C, and that's the minimum viable product. I'm going to that later on. So what comes first? Do I need a complete team, or I can start with some basic team that will be functional for this first stage of the work? Remember, ideally, we need a good commercial person, and ideally we need people from the technology transfer office that have been working in the field of industry for a lot of time and has a lot of years. In real life, we don't have that. Ideally, professors would connect with needs, and they will have contacts in industry, and they would talk to industry, and they will come with a solution that's most of the times validated. That happens in the MIT, that happens in Stanford, that happens in a lot of other universities around the world of more evolved ecosystems. In our real life, professors tend to investigate what they want, and that's okay. But the problem is that we cannot, the fact is that we cannot assume that they are solving a real problem for someone, and that problem is, it's not only a real problem, but a priority problem for someone, meaning that somebody is willing to pay for this. And if they are solving a real problem, and a priority problem, is the solution they are thinking of an adequate solution for that problem? Is what they are envisioning as the minimum viable product what needs to be done, or that's too much? Most of the times, professors decide, well, but this needs to be miniaturized up to this point, and it needs to waste that much, and it needs to cost that much. Who do you talk to? How do you know that that's what you need? Is that what you really need for a minimum viable product? Did you talk to your clients? And most of the time, not for saying all the times, the answer is that they say yes, but when you start digging, is that no. Is that they didn't went through that process. So please don't assume that we are solving a real problem, a priority problem, or that our solution is a suitable solution for the market. So what happens then? The past years, I've been obsessed with these I-Corps programs. I've certified in I-Corps methodology, and I've been do a lot of reading and putting this into practice. And I'm not going, this is not a lecture, but a whole course per se, and a hands-on, this is not something that you teach in theory, but just to give some hints on this, you need to understand the job to be done of your customer, ¿sí? ¿Cuál es la tarea que el cliente tiene que resolver, ¿sí? Y cuando le pregunto al cliente no es lo mismo. It's not the same to ask for the client. I'm going to say this in Spanish because it's probably the most important part of this. Cuando yo le pregunto a un potencial cliente o algún stakeholder clave en torno a mi solución, ¿sí? Por el problema voy a tener un montón de respuestas que no voy a tener si yo pregunto directamente desde mi solución, ¿sí? Y ni hablar, si yo en vez de preguntarle si pagaría por mi solución, le pregunto, ¿le parece interesante una solución que resuelva esto? Se dan cuenta, las respuestas que obtengo son bien distintas. Voy a poner un ejemplo. There is a book called When Kale Competes with Coffee. And what's the job to be done by coffee? Coffee is not just a drink, it's energy in the morning, let's say, or in the afternoon, right? In Colombia, coffee, it's huge. But if you think coffee as a drink, you have some competitors. You have tea, for instance. But if you think coffee as energy, this competes with a kale smoothie, or this competes with with Red Bull, or this competes with medicines, or this competes with exercise. This competes with a balanced diet. This competes with a lot of things, right? And so when you ask for the problem, then you can address whether this is a real problem, for whom it is a real problem, whether there are other problems which are predominant over this problem, whether this, even when it's a problem, it's a significant problem, somebody is willing to pay for this. This is not only for entrepreneurship, it's for technology transfer also. Once you understand the job to be done, and then you translate that into a problem, then you can conduct interviews to see whether you are addressing correctly the problem, and then you should switch into a solution and see whether your solution fits the problem. It's perceived as it fits the problem. And sometimes what we face is that our technologies are ahead of the times, and the market is not prepared for a technology. So showing a solution for a problem, and a solution which is way ahead of time in our country especially, could be a little problem. But again, it's another discussion. But understanding the problem, then see this fit with the problem and my proposed solution. And when you would say the fit by problem and solution, is understanding what is a minimum viable product, not like the desired product with all the features. It's the minimum viable product, because you should fail small. You should go as fast as you can to the market, then fail, or then correct, or see whether this is work, and then you can have other versions of the product, service, etc. And after fitting the problem and the solution, then you do the product market fit. And for this, you need to get out of the building. This is not something that you do online with secondary searches. You need to talk to people, structure interviews. And the good part of this, I didn't think it this way until somebody with a PhD background, which is now a business person, told me, is that if you think it in a way, doing this with a very thorough method, it's scientific method. And if you explain this in a good way for researcher, you are doing good research. You're doing research in a way. They conduct research for the lab, and they won't say, I tried in this very lazy experiments and this works, and then I publish it. No, they need robust data to support decisions and to support publications, right? This is the same. And if you explain it this way, probably they will connect with this much more. Team. There, as I told before, there are different roles that professors, students could have in this new company. Considering dedication, try to talk to them, because it is not natural, in my experience, that professors, they say, I want to be the chief technology officer. Or I want to be the one who pushes this out. Sometimes they say, I want to be the CEO. They can't be the CEO if they are full-time professors. But besides that, even if they could, if there was not a conflict in there for the university, do they have the time to do that? They don't. Are they willing to do all the job? What are they willing to do? How much time are they willing to spend? Everybody, and this is particularly relevant when you see spin-off companies in which there are professors and alumni and students involved, because professors think in my experience, a lot of professors, don't say professor, but a lot of professors think that they deserve at least as much as a student, because they are the professors. And the students think that they are putting all their time and their life in this, and the professor is putting some few hours in this. they want some more. And if those expectations are not well built at the beginning, when nobody puts money in this, when this is just an idea, when we're raising money, they will fight. And you know what? There will be no company to raise money. That happened to me twice. They postponed. I told them the first one I didn't know it. Second time it happened to me. I envisioned this was going to happen. I told them to have these conversations, try to help them. I offered myself even to be there and offer some advice to all of them. And then they go and think by their own. And they didn't want to do that because they said they had everything clear. I knew they didn't. And then they were about to raise money. And the reason why the deal went off is that the VCs found out that the team was going to get dissolved one way or another in time because the expectations between them were not aligned. And the other thing you need to, or at least another advice is that, yes, we found out that we need to be there in the whole process, accompanying the process. We help them get contacts, I will talk about that later, to raise money, but that doesn't mean that we will do the work for them. We can open doors for them, we can provide advice, we can spend time with them, helping them, but we are not writing the business model or the business plan. We are not conducting the interviews. We are helping them to create, to think and design the interviews we need to make and to whom we need to contact. But we are not running those interviews, or we are not within our office writing a list of the persons they need to contact. They need to do that, maybe with us, with some help of us, but they need to do the work, because if not, they will never launch their spin-off company. So it's not the same helping them that subsidizing their activities a company needs to do. Resources. I'm almost done and pretty close in time. As I said before, research most of the times don't connect necessarily with real needs, with the real problem, or the solution not all the time fits. And what the professor thinks that needs to be done, it's not always, or most of the times, it's not what the company is willing to see. I always use this example. Some of you heard this before. I remember a professor which works with anti-seismic solutions. He's top of the line in his field in the world. And he creates very good solutions. So we go with this solution to an English company, which provides solutions for different countries in the world. And the company says, what you have is a Porsche and we need a Fiat. What you have is great, but none of our clients is going to buy a Porsche. They will buy a Fiat. In terms of, we don't need that much features. The cost needs to be cut down, and this needs to be smaller, and a lot of stuff, and less complex to use. But you should not stay with that. Then we ask, okay, can you help us? Are you willing to partner with us to help us? Even at that stage, they didn't put any money, but they were helping us to address the problem and to fit the solution to the real needs of the client in terms of future steps, future development or maturation steps. So if we heard that and we went back to the lab, it's like, okay, we need to make it cheaper. What does cheaper mean? 10%, 20%, 30%? What are the features that we need to take off to make this cheaper? Are those that we are taking off those that, in fact, are essential for a client? And for that, we need a partner. We need somebody telling that or giving orientations on that. Professors, most of the time, don't have that information, at least in our countries. And so if you're putting some money, pre-seed money, seed money, sometimes universities run these accelerator programs or maturation programs where we put some money, or gap programs where we put some money in technologies to do some things, because we think if we answer these 3 questions, then somebody would invest. We need to be sure that those 3 things that we are doing are the ones that need to be either solved or done or whatever needs to be done for somebody to invest. And for that, we need to talk to that someone and understand what needs to be done to get an investment. When you look for money, you need to look for smart money. That's not easy at all to find in our countries. Smart money means not only an investor, but an investor who knows your field of expertise, who have access to networks, who may help you in a second round of investment to pick other investors, but who would help you to take decisions in real life, in real time, to move forward with that technology and to comply with the milestones that are being decided to move forward the technology, right? And when you get into a relationship with an investor, it's like a marriage. It's going to be for a long time. There are marriages that last less than 5-10 years, at least, that an investor is there with you in time, 15, maybe more, but at least they are thinking in at least 5 times. I mean, in our countries, at least 5 times, 5 years. Sorry. And so their calculation is, I want to win, I don't know, 5x in 5 years. Just saying anything. El inversor tiene una tesis de inversión y esa tesis de inversión es quiero multiplicar esto por tanto en tanta cantidad de tiempo, ¿sí? Y entonces lo que hacemos es que nos enfrentamos a los inversionistas, por favor pónganos plata, y no los entrevistamos nosotros a ellos también. Entonces, como esta es una relación, it's a long-term relationship, if the investor if we don't feel comfortable with the investor, then we will have problems. Of course, this is very naive from me because we don't have 5 investors knocking to our doors to get our technology. Sometimes we have only one, but at least we need to understand who we're marrying with and which are the pros and cons of that relationship and up to where we will be getting involved with them. Mentors are a key resource. And when I'm talking about mentors, I'm talking about a person helping the process of evolving, which ideally, should be somebody from el ámbito tecnológico de la tecnología, from the industry of the technology, who knows the business, who knows the ecosystem, who will help us take smart decisions, who know the key players, right? And sometimes we need could be mentors or could be advisors for the company who will be helping, let's say, regulatory issues, who will be helping in other decision-making processes, or who will, at a certain point, interact with us. And sometimes the mentor you need for a part of the process is not necessarily the mentor that you need in the future. That happens the same with the CEOs. Sometimes the CEO you need at the beginning is not going to be the CEO when you go public, cuando uno ya cotiza en bolsa, ¿sí? Or even before that, after you raise a lot of money and you do need a lot of things to be done. I'm finishing here. Networks. How do we they're naturally, academic entrepreneurs don't connect with each other. There are not many places where within the country, within the region, academic entrepreneurs can meet either with other entrepreneurs, with investors, with key stakeholders that will help them to address some questions they have for his technology. So how do we generate those spaces where they can meet? I mean, Jim has shown a lot of initiatives, different initiatives that will help connections, resources, mentors, and all that. Well, how do we, without that much money, create some tools to help them, or some spaces for connections? And something I found, I will end up with this probably right on time, is that I will say this in Spanish. Cuando nosotros creíamos que no era bueno que la universidad de por sí tiene muchos, y a ustedes les pasa lo mismo en sus universidades, muchos alumnos que están dirigiendo, probablemente las cabezas de los fondos de inversión, de grandes empresas, de fondos. Cuando hablo de fondos de inversión, hablo de VCs, hablo de corporate ventures también. Are people that are former students are alumni from our universities, right? So university has connections. And other things that, other connections, for instance, Católica University, I spent a lot of time in building institutional connections with associations of venture capitals, of angel investors, of family offices. And, but you know what? We don't present everyone who wants to start a company to them. What we do is that we tell a potential entrepreneur, do you want access to our networks? Well, you should do if you do what we told you to do, and you succeed in that, then when we think you are ready, we present you. And because of that, we assure that aquellos that we do present to those friend investors of the university, we cannot grant they want to finance. In fact, they finance very few, but they know that when we knock on their door and we say, we have 2, 3, we want you to meet some entrepreneur, they know that at least they have a robust business model in place, they have a plan, they have this very well validated, they have a lot of answers to many of their questions, and so when we knock at the door, they know that there's some quality there going on. Perhaps they are not interested in the technology, but perhaps there is not a good enough business for them. But at least this is well put in place, and so that is really helpful for us. And we do that in one-on-one meetings. We introduce a particular spin-off company to either even before they are already incorporated as a company. And sometimes what we do is that we say, well, let's put together all the ACBC, que es las National Associations of Venture Capitalists, and we do a meeting with all of them, and we decide, okay, so these 6 or 7 spin-off companies that are not already incorporated, they will present. And they all see that, of course, when they are all together, the VCs won't show their interest when they are with others. They may ask some timid question or not, and then they contact us and say, I want to have a one-on-one meeting with this company or that other company. So, but before doing that, we make sure that they are ready. And the other thing that we've learned is that as we have those networks, we can use that people to give advice in very early stages, meaning that we need to balance their expectations. So it is not the same that we have a company ready to start the process of raising money. This is one conversation with the investor. And another conversation is, you as a friend of the university, can you spend an hour in giving some advice to this company and looking this as an investor and giving some feedback? This is at all ready for raising money. They don't have questions for answers probably, but we need you to give us some direction. And this is not the mentor that permanently works with the company. This is some VC or angel or family office which has business in the field of the technology and is willing to give an hour of time just to give some advice. But he knows to what is coming. He's not coming thinking that this is a potential investment, and in turn it's not, and it's somebody very green. You know, that he knows and the professor knows that he's not there for raising money. It's just first and starting to understand what is the logic of thinking of a potential investor. And that's it. And additionally, we talk about when is the right time to create a company and to have a license. And with this I finish, when it's a good time to stop pursuing the efforts of our offices to that company. When they don't give as much effort as we give. It's like they can continue, and if they decide to start again, putting some effort on that, they will come back, and then, okay, we will decide once again, do we want to really actively help them, or we will be passive and see how they do, and if they need something, they come and knock our door, and we help this particular thing. Entonces, si no quieren ser ayudados, no los ayudamos, excepto las cuestiones institucionales básicas que tienen que ser resueltas necesariamente. Con esto termino. Now you need to comment, but because I made a lot of effort in doing this in English.
Thank you, Magali, for your intervention. Again, I changed the language because the request to people in YouTube, then to precise or clarify some aspects of your presentation. So, 5 aspectos importantes que vamos a responder. Uno sobre si los recursos, dentro de los recursos, de pronto en tu experiencia o con otras universidades o en la Católica de Chile, hay diferentes niveles de recursos. Por ejemplo, para destrabar ciertas tecnologías, porque hay también, sabemos que hay recursos de mayor magnitud. Entonces, si ustedes tenían algún programa respecto a esto y cómo lo manejaban.
Sí, perfecto. Sí, nosotros tenemos 2 cosas. Uno es un programa acelerador. No se corrió los 2 años de pandemia por un tema de recursos, pero se corrió todos los años anteriores. Es un programa que empezó siendo, el profesor nos planteaba ciertas preguntas que tenía que hacerse o ciertas cosas adicionales técnicas que tenía que hacer para que la tecnología estuviera lista, ya sea para una transferencia o un emprendimiento, y nosotros poníamos eso que era hasta en ese momento, eran hasta 40, en ese momento era mucha plata, mucha plata, entre comillas, pero para nosotros era un montón, hasta $40.000 por tecnología, unas más o menos 8 tecnologías, a veces un poquito menos, dependiendo del año y del presupuesto. Después nos dimos cuenta que era dinero tirado, por todo lo que les dije antes, porque en realidad no hacíamos una validación de qué era lo que realmente se necesitaba. Entonces invertíamos ese dinero y cuando salíamos a ofrecerlo o se quería armar un emprendimiento, en realidad nadie estaba dispuesto a tomarlo porque no le servía. O había que responder otras preguntas, en definitiva, ¿no? O había que resolver otras cosas que no estaban resueltas. Entonces, como al tercer año, lo que hicimos fue modificarlo, este mismo programa, y tener una etapa previa en donde se hace una validación y en base a esa validación se tomaban las decisiones de inversión. Ese es un programa, se volvió a correr este año, no lo dije, con líneas temáticas por facultades, o una parte para ciencias, otra para ingeniería y una línea general. Y la línea general la dejamos solo para emprendimientos y emprendimientos que están con nuestro apoyo. O sea, pueden postular todos, pero entre los requisitos para otorgar este financiamiento, que ahora es mucho menos, son unos, no me acuerdo, entre $8.000 y $10.000 por tecnología, y pueden usarlo para tener a la persona comercial, para responder algunas variables o avanzar algunas variables técnicas que estén súper validadas con el entorno, para realizar un pequeño piloto con alguien, e idealmente si van a hacer un piloto, que la contraparte ponga al menos recursos valorizados. Significa esto que pongan personas o sus instalaciones para poder hacer este piloto.
Muchas gracias. La siguiente corresponde a conflictos de interés. Sabemos que es un gran tema los conflictos de interés, pero específicamente de pronto algunos casos concretos en cómo han manejado el tema de espacios, qué tanto se permite a los docentes manejar los laboratorios o los espacios para su emprendimiento.
Ese es un gran tema. En la Católica el gran problema al que nos enfrentamos es que los dueños de los espacios son los decanos. Es la administración central, no es la dueña de las facultades. Estoy diciendo en términos muy prácticos. Entonces, el que toma la decisión última de qué es lo que puede y no puede hacer un académico, a ver, voy un poco para atrás. Nuestro reglamento, que está súper desactualizado y que estoy trabajando ahora en actualizarlo, establece que los académicos podrán tener un acuerdo con sus unidades académicas para usar espacios de laboratorio en tiempo fuera de su horario laboral para el emprendimiento, pero va a tener que llegar a un acuerdo con la facultad. Lo que significa que va a tener que pagar de alguna manera. Esto puede ser ahora, puede ser diferido en el tiempo, etcétera. Puede ser con adicional a la licencia. Y las distintas facultades han tomado diferentes decisiones. Hay desde facultades que han dicho, yo quiero que esto ocurra, entonces mientras el profesor siga cumpliendo todo lo que tiene que cumplir, no use tiempo de los alumnos o de gente que no debería estar involucrándose, excepto que ellos quieran y que tengan algún contrato con la empresa para dedicarse a esto, y mientras sea productivo y cumpla con todos sus compromisos científicos, lo puede hacer. cuando ya se pasan en tiempo, etcétera, ya ahí la universidad, la facultad como que pone los límites, y hay otras facultades que han dicho, de entrada nos tenemos que poner de acuerdo y, por ejemplo, una facultad, recuerdo que en 2 casos, que siguió la misma decisión en 2 casos, que es, van a pagar por esto, pero lo van a pagar diferido, hicieron como un acuerdo súper laxo, si les va bien, si el emprendimiento les va bien, van a pagar, si no, entonces compartimos un poco el riesgo, porque igual la universidad está tomando participación accionaria, estamos adquiriendo, capturando valor por la licencia, etcétera, y después, o sea, esos son los casos como más relevantes, pero básicamente, en nuestro caso, hay lineamientos generales e institucionales, y después hay bajadas que es por facultades, la decisión la toma el decano.
Listo. Muchas gracias. La otra pregunta está relacionada con el tiempo. Cuando los docentes no tienen el tiempo para trabajar en sus empresas, ¿ellos mismos buscan el grupo de trabajo o la oficina de transferencia les ayuda a conformar esos grupos de trabajo?
Es una súper, súper buena pregunta y muy compleja. A ver, un poco y un poco. Hacemos un montón de cosas para ayudarlos, que van desde... a ver, voy un poco más atrás. Generalmente los equipos tienden a pensar que solo con personas técnicas pueden sacar adelante el emprendimiento, ¿sí? Entonces lo que suelen hacer es que ponen a un estudiante de pregrado, de posgrado, a un doctorando, a un postdoc, a trabajar en esto. Entonces el que le dedica más tiempo es ese estudiante, que la lógica piramidal de la academia está por debajo del profesor y se maneja bajo la misma lógica que en el laboratorio, ¿sí? Y eso tiene obvias complicaciones de las que ya hablé antes, y entonces ahí lo que hacemos nosotros es desde ayudar a que esa persona se empodere, ayudar al profesor a entender, si esa persona tiene, hay gente que tiene background técnico, pero que funciona bien en las primeras etapas, aunque no sea un comercial, con apoyo de mentores, de personas que sí tienen un background comercial, ¿sí? Hay gente que no, que es muy técnica, que no funciona, no le funciona la lógica de pensar el negocio como un negocio y se queda solo en el desafío técnico. Entonces ahí ayudamos al profesor a pensar en que esa persona no es correcta, a cambiar a la persona, o si la persona tiene potencial, a entrenar a esa persona. Entonces tenemos una oferta de cursos, etcétera. Por ejemplo, un curso que es para estudiantes de doctorado, que antes lo tomaban súper poquitos y ahora es ultra masivo, ya nos pidieron hacer 2 versiones en el año, que son 2 días intensivos en donde les enseñamos lo básico de esto, y la idea es que se encanten con esto, y es como una especie de learning by doing, pero en 2 días. No puede aprender tanto en 2 días. Pero les hacemos trabajar en grupo y ir pensando todo esto, el problema, la solución, qué preguntas hay que hacer, la propiedad intelectual, armar una especie de pitch, salir a hacer algunas entrevistas en el campus, pero esto no les da información real, les hace jugar un poco bajo esta lógica distinta de funcionamiento y llevarse los conceptos básicos, y a los que les interesa vienen con nosotros y ya los metemos en capacitaciones más profundas, acompañamiento, red de mentores y otras cosas que tenemos. Tenemos una red de mentores que ahora le estamos potenciando para los emprendimientos tecnológicos, porque nos dimos cuenta que no cualquier mentor le sirve un emprendimiento tecnológico, y que en nuestro ecosistema no tenemos muchos emprendedores tecnológicos a los que que estén de vuelta y que quieran give back mentoring. Entonces, lo que estamos tratando de ver es cómo robustecemos esto. Por ahora, los mentores que tenemos son gente de la industria que funciona para algunas cosas del emprendimiento, no para todas, porque no funciona con la lógica necesariamente de un startup, de lo ágil, o de un startup tecnológico, que es súper distinto a un emprendimiento tradicional, ¿sí? Tiene variables de tiempo, de desarrollo, de inversión, en fin, lógicas distintas de funcionamiento. Entonces tenemos los mentores, nosotros, hay personas de nuestro equipo, yo soy una de esas personas que dedicamos mucho de nuestro tiempo a trabajar con los emprendimientos. Desde que cambié mi rol, le dedico un montón de tiempo a juntarme con los emprendimientos, a apoyarlos, a trabajar en esto. Tenemos diferentes programas en ingeniería, que hay un curso que los apoya, que lo dicta un inversionista a prepararse para levantar inversión, otro curso, o sea, un curso del MBA que los ayuda a trabajar el modelo de negocio, un FODA y el modelo de negocios. A veces funciona bien, a veces funciona mal, según los alumnos que te toquen en el apoyo. Y tenemos, bueno, y seguimos buscando mecanismos, por ejemplo, una cosa que estamos soñando y que debería armar el año que viene, me lo pidieron para el año que viene, es como un semillero de CEOs. De gente que viene del MBA, que gente que viene del Magíster de Innovación, de gente que de afuera, gente que emprendió y que le fue mal, pero que pasó por este proceso y aprendió en ese proceso, y que le fue mal por variables que no tienen que ver con su desempeño, probablemente, y generar este semillero de CEOs para hacerles el match con las tecnologías.
Ya nos respondiste parte de la pregunta que nos hacían sobre cuántos programas de apoyo al emprendimiento tienen, porque algunas estructuras son centralizadas en las oficinas de transferencia y se ayudan con estos programas. Entonces, más o menos alrededor de cuántos programas tienen para el emprendimiento.
A ver, primero tenemos una dirección de emprendimiento y tenemos una dirección de transferencia, pero lo que nos dimos cuenta hace cuando empezamos a potenciar esto unos 6 años atrás, hasta ahí era como muy reactivos, empezamos a potenciarlo ahí 5 años atrás, más fuertemente, nos dimos cuenta que el equipo de transferencia no tenía todas las competencias y el equipo de emprendimiento definitivamente no sabía cómo apoyar emprendimientos tecnológicos, que son otro animal. Entonces decidimos hacer un grupo de trabajo conjunto entre las personas más senior del equipo de emprendimiento y las personas más senior del equipo de transferencia. Ese equipo de trabajo lo coordino yo, y es un equipo de trabajo que básicamente lo que hace es dar un acompañamiento boutique a ciertos emprendimientos, definir programas conjuntos entre transferencia, emprendimiento, facultades, en fin, coordinar con otras grandes iniciativas institucionales para generar desde recursos para hacer este fondo semilla que estamos lanzando ahora, específico para los emprendimientos, no el general para todo, cómo potenciar la red de mentores o cómo conectamos diferentes iniciativas de la universidad que antes no conversaban, cómo a cada uno de estos cursos, los que son buenos, como les contaba, este curso de ingeniería que es de ingeniería comercial, que es de inversión, o el curso del MBA, o el curso del Magíster de Innovación, cómo decimos, bueno, estos son los académicos que quieren emprender o los alumnos que quieren emprender, propongámoslos como casos para trabajo en esos cursos. Entonces, le dedicamos mucho tiempo a esto, a pensar estrategia a nivel institucional y a pensar este trabajo. Y además tenemos, como decía, la red de mentores, que estamos creando un capítulo de la red de mentores para emprendimientos tecnológicos. Ahí nos falta todavía potenciarlo mucho más por lo que contaba antes. Tenemos el fondo Semilla y otros fondos así de algunas facultades para esto. Tenemos una entidad jurídica distinta a la universidad que trabaja particularmente con las tecnologías que va a licenciar ingeniería o los emprendimientos que va a licenciar, los emprendimientos que genera ingeniería, que es muy útil para emprendimientos de corte de servicios, que son servicios en base a desarrollos tecnológicos. Entonces se incuban ahí, le prestan todo el soporte para prestar el servicio y tiene la fuerza de ventas, de finanzas, etcétera, desde esa entidad, que por eso les contaba que es más un módulo que puede ser muy de utilidad para el modelo que ustedes están creando, y con eso prestan servicios hasta que empiezan a ver que los números son positivos y ahí generan el spin-off. Y eso se hace de la mano con este comité de spin-off que le llamamos, que es este grupo de trabajo, y con la oficina de transferencia. Y lo último es que tenemos, y este comité se junta formalmente una vez al mes, pero tenemos sesiones a discreción que tienen que ver con emprendimientos que nos vienen a presentar los avances, les damos feedback, revisamos la hoja de ruta, tomamos decisiones, y tenemos además, no sé, un Entrepreneur in Residence que va cambiando año a año y que lo ponemos a mentorear con algunas horas a estos emprendimientos, y inversionistas amigos que los ponemos a ayudarlos, y todo esto es a demanda, digamos, a demanda de las necesidades del emprendimiento.
Muy interesante, Magali. Y ya para cerrar, nuestra última pregunta es: ¿cómo se regula la experiencia de titularidad de derechos de propiedad intelectual sobre el conocimiento que ha sido mejorado por la spin-off? Sabemos que eso depende como que la licencia, pero algunos casos que nos puedas contar, si se comparte desde el principio o si incluso si queda con cotitularidad la universidad, o si hay en casos en que ya no sería cotitularidad la universidad.
That is a very sophisticated question, and I don't think I have as opposed to other things that I think I have good success stories, the ones I told you about. In this case, I'm going to reply in English, because I think that what Jim can comment on this is probably much better than what I'm going to say, because I don't feel comfortable 100% on what we are doing now in that way. So what we the general rule, which may not be the case for all the licenses to spin-off companies, is that we say, any modification that is within the patent, the scope of the patent belongs to the university, and you need to pay the same royalty as you're paying now. And I don't think that's a problem for anybody. The second thing is if you improve sometimes we say that you need to improve the development with us. That's mostly for licensing out, not for spin-off companies. For spin-off companies, we mostly don't do that. We allow them to modify the technology, and we say that we are going to, that could gather a review of the commercial terms of the license. And that was often problematic. And what we did to mitigate that is that in some cases, we end up with a formula. For instance, I remember one case in which we said, this is a genetic sign with 8 genes, and this is used for prognosis for prostate cancer. But they were also trying with this. I want to give a real life example. I trying to remember that example. So they were also trying with breast cancer, and they didn't, within the patent was cover also breast cancer because of different variables, right? So if they use this for breast cancer, it's within, because in the patent, so we make more precision on that. And if you modify up to there were 8 genes, right? So if you modify 2 genes, then the royalty will become this. And if you we did that, and we did that because it was a very tough negotiation, and the entrepreneur didn't want to give that up. He didn't want to leave that negotiation for the future. And I honestly don't know. I don't know whether that was good or bad, because that was a year ago, and we didn't get to the point where they have new results. But I suspect this will be a problem too. So I don't know, because if you put it broadly that we will negotiate that in the future, that will probably be an issue for an investor. But if you make you state a formula to calculate that diminishing of the royalty, then that could potentially be a problem too, legally speaking, because they can do something else, and they can say, but you said this, but this is not exactly the case of the examples we gave, and so I don't know. So perhaps your opinion would be much better than mine.
Yeah.
So I assume the question is about further development.
Exactly, by a spin-off company.
Yeah. And I think my experience is that I'll go to the bottom first, actually, to the end. And I think simple is always better than more complex in a license, because when a license gets more complicated, there ends up being more bickering about it and more disagreements all the way along the line. But it's very common for a startup at MIT or anywhere else to begin with a portfolio of core IP. Some of it might be very basic principles, which is good IP to have if you can get it, because it covers everything, more examples than you can put in a patent. But then companies always build their own IP on top of it, and sometimes to extremes. And generally, in most cases, I haven't had disagreements about during a life of a license, because MIT licensed 4 patents and the company now created 8 more. So now the MIT IP is only 1/3 of the patent portfolio, or 1/4, or 1/10. In general, the argument that I would always use is that we price the portfolio fairly enough that it expects that more IP is going to be created.
Right.
And if MIT had 20 cases, then perhaps it would not have been the same terms. There would have been higher royalties or whatever. The most of the disagreements I've gotten into, or the detailed discussions, have been more at end of life, when in fact the MIT IP would expire before the company's IP because it predates it. And at some point, the truth is, the IP protection that's covered under the license is now gone, and the value back to MIT ends, even though the company has created, hopefully, a very strong building of its own IP and its own technology that continues to create value. And that's where you could argue hand-waving, but that's where the impact over income comes in, because we would no longer get income, but it certainly would still be growing impact.
Let me add a little one more. Yesterday we spoke, how do you calculate the royalty or the compensation for the license? And I said, we look for comparatives, comparative deals, taking into account that what is being paid for a similar technology, similar stage of development in the US is not going to be paid to us, unfortunately. So we use that as a starting point. Then we understand the market. I told you a lot of ways we put a price on the technology, but what I didn't say is that we started to ask, as I said before, we don't have people with 15 years of experience in industry or more that then come to work for the technology transfer office. So we don't know the industry that much. So, or sometimes we don't know the industry. So what we do is that we also have these people from industry that we as technology transfer people ask them, what do you think? What would be a good scheme sounds something else. Scheme. I would formula for the compensation. Would it be more royalties, milestone payments? What's the and those people from industry sometimes help us to calculate and to create a formula for the compensation consideration, which is in line of what the company will expect, either if it's a spin-off company, and we do even more that if it's a spin-off company, because if it's a company, the company would say, no, this is crazy, let's talk about this other way of doing it. But if it's a spin-off company, they don't know. So we need to understand that before they face investors. So we ask a lot of people their opinion on this before, in some cases before, and in some other cases it's really easy, and you put just it's easy, the royalty you should consider. There's no discussion on that. But if there is a point of discussion, then we ask other people to give us advice on that for free, of course.
Okay, maybe the last one question.
Una pregunta, la última, for both. En general, el primer año, los primeros 2 años de vida de un emprendimiento, pues un porcentaje alto de los emprendimientos en general, pues tienden a no sobrevivir. En el caso de la experiencia tuya, Magali, and also in your experience, Jean, you show us a very interesting chart about this. But just if you, what are the results in terms of this first year or first 2 years? How many or what percentage of success do you have, Magali, and also Jean?
Do you mean after entering into the market with a product or a service, or after they decided to create a company?
I'm talking after entering into the market in order to compare with the figures of the entrepreneur in general. Okay.
In my experience, those who in the cases I know that went to the market, most of them didn't fail. Perhaps they don't get rich, but they didn't fail. The problem for in our case is that before that is that sometimes they don't get to raise money, they don't get to the market for different reasons. And there we lose a lot of the pipeline, but not because they get to the market.
What happened before? But also, Jim.
Well, so I think as I showed in that chart,
Yes.
I was always surprised at how long MIT startups could continue to raise funding, even perhaps if they hadn't gotten to market yet, because sometimes for as much as 10 years. Some of that's technology, some of it's not, but they managed to raise combinations of government money and venture money, and they're quite skilled at figuring out how to keep themselves alive, perhaps not wildly succeeding, but the fact that they've still been employing people and keeping part of the economy going is quite impressive. And most of them, I didn't have very many companies that would fail early on. And I think part of that is because the MIT name, whether it should be this way or not, the MIT name on technology is a get out of jail free card to raise some first levels of money to get going for quite some time. So if you have MIT technology,
It's easier to raise money.
it seems grander than it really is. But
And in the agreements, you allow the startup, the spin-off to show the MIT brand, to use the MIT brand.
so they're in very limited fashion. It cannot. The simple rule is that it cannot appear to be an endorsement. That MIT says, "Oh yes, we validate this product." They can say that they have a license from MIT, and that the technology was created at MIT, and that has more value than it should, but it has value.
But yes, the point is that we talked about yesterday about that, is that sometimes the use of the brands and the logos and all that comes with either reputational risk and with legal liability, responsabilidad legal, because of the use of the trademark in the product. I have in the past, a long time ago, a problem in Argentina with using the mark of the institution, the trademark of the institution in a product, and so perhaps you don't have the legal thing, but you have the reputational thing. So, and it's different if you just make mention of the technology arising from the university, but it needs to be very clear that, and in my case, and in all the institutions I've worked with, my advice was always that we need to see either the package of the promotion or in the website, how they are going to advertise it. We say what they can advertise and what they can't advertise. How they are spin-offs from Universidad Católica, but they cannot put the logo of Católica over there like this, as if it was an endorsement of Católica, right? So we need to see how they use the reference, not the trademarks or the logos, the reference to the institution as a reference, not as an endorsement.
The TLO had a full-time person responsible for the use of the MIT name, as it is, as it's allowed in limited fashion in our licenses.
And you put that in the contract. You put that you need to review any packaging, any communication where you address to the university before they do it.
And if they violate it, it could lead to termination of the license. So they don't want to they don't want to jeopardize that.
Okay, and then last one.
Just a little question regarding that. Have you ever had in your experience a misuse of the trademark or the commercial name of the university in a relationship with a spin-off company?
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
And generally, the person in our office who's responsible for that would engage the company. And I mean, MIT has a lot of leverage when it comes to this, right? The licensor has a lot of leverage, because if you can pull the license, and the license should read that that's one of many terms in the license that could lead to termination. They can't afford to have that happen, right? If they care about a license in the first place, they can't risk it because they use the MIT name.
but in what happened, what I've seen is that sometimes that's unintentional. They think because the person taking the marketing decisions has no idea of the contract, and as they know the association, in my case with Católica, they want to put Católica over there. I have this case where this was a honey certification. This is a very sophisticated process to certificate the pureness on another purity and other attributes of honey. And they said this is a certification from Universidad Católica, and it was just the process behind the scenes was developed by Católica. The certification was not endorsed by Católica. We were not giving that certification to the companies. It was another, not even a spin-off company. It was a third, already established company. And the answer of that, and I truly believe that because I've met in person with them, was that, oh my God, we are taking this off. We didn't know the commercial, probably they were taking advantage of that, but the marketing person put that over there and they thought it was okay. They didn't go and read the license. But when we said, please, we didn't manage that by intimidating them with a carta documento or a cease and desist letter. We first decided that we were going to have a conversation with them in person and explain them. And as Jim said, as this is a cause of termination of the contract, then they said, excuse me, and the other day this was off.
It's a risk that's most common right at the time of licensing, and the risk diminishes very quickly. It's usually what we expect. When a license is completed, half the companies would like to have a press release explaining now that they have this license from MIT. And we ask that a draft of that be submitted to MIT and get edited. But if they go ahead with that without reviewing it with us, very often it'll have some errors in it. We'll get in touch with them right away, ask them to withdraw it and correct it.
Okay, thank you very much for the questions. We can share in the lunch. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. So, en la tarde vamos a comenzar con Bogotá. Tienen los resultados. Estamos corridos en el horario. Y quiero preguntar, ¿Manizales va a presentar tecnologías?
Tengo dos videos que te compartí, no sé si que tenemos de dejar caer ahí.
Ok, pienso que con eso es suficiente.
Son cortos, pero que sí.
Vale, creo que con eso es suficiente. ¿Ya están compartidos? Sí. ¿Listo? Perfecto. Con eso comenzamos. Y nos vemos a las 2 de la tarde. And then we go for
We leaving stuff here.
we're gonna leave this stuff here.
She says, sort of trusting it. You did a very thorough